Hi everyone, my name is Megan May and I'm presenting for the LAS 239 Research and Evaluation Methods course. My project is based on the discussion of diversity in children's literature. During my literature review, I noticed a significant amount of inconsistency in the way the definition of diversity in children's literature is expressed. The definition of diversity in children's literature also seemed to be based on assumptions which were not yet proven, so I really wanted to explore the reasons for this. Overall, this research project will specifically identify the trends presented through studies that define diversity in children's literature and discuss the importance of it over a period of 10 years. This will be done through questionnaires, interviews, and secondary analysis. This study will collect data from the same 5 participants, and these participants will be interviewed every year until April 7th, 2029. One study that is similar to this research project is the Accessibility of Diverse Literature for Children in Libraries by Renee J. Ting. In Renee's study, she questioned what current research tells us is the importance of having access to culturally diverse materials. Ting's study, similar to my literature review, found that there is little information about the effects of diverse literature on children. This is concerning considering many studies have stressed the importance of diversity in children's literature. So when confronted with why diversity is important, many researchers will not have much evidence to support their statement. There aren't many other studies that explore the same research topic I did, so in this research project, I tried my best to think about what still needs to be covered when discussing studies that discuss diversity in children's literature. Studies still need to explore how researchers have defined diversity in children's literature in contrast to how the American Library Association has defined it. I chose to compare and contrast the way studies discuss the definition of diversity with the way the American Library Association discusses it, because the American Library Association offers a broad definition of diversity and serves over 50,000 information professionals, which means that they must have a profound impact on the library and information science profession. Studies also need to explore how the definition of diversity in annual reports from the Cooperative Children's Book Center, CCBC, reflects how studies define diversity. This is important because many studies acknowledge reports published by the CCBC when discussing diversity in children's literature. Additionally, research has not discussed how diversity in children's literature is defined over time. This is important when thinking about the trends in the way people think about diversity and whether this has affected studies based on diversity in children's literature. Lastly, it would be interesting to consider why studies typically assert the importance of diversity in children's literature the way they do. After reading a significant amount of literature on studies which discuss diversity in children's literature, I am curious to know why there is little evidence to support the notion of diverse literature being important for children. The theoretical basis of my study is based on the fact that there is a lack of consistency among the ways in which researchers define diversity in children's literature. As I stated before, I also noticed that researchers often assert the importance of diversity in children's literature based on assumptions which have not yet been proven. The definition of diversity in children's literature and the way its importance is asserted in research are concepts which will be measured among 5 participants throughout this research project. The results of this project should allow researchers to understand whether they are studying and discussing diversity in children's literature in ways that fairly represent various types of diverse populations, such as those explained by the American Library Association. Researchers will also be able to reflect on the way they interpret the importance of diversity in children's literature and be able to determine whether their assertions are supported by valid evidence. My research aim is to examine how researchers have discussed diversity in children's literature through defining diversity and discussing the importance of it. This project will do this by answering the following questions throughout this study. How do quantitative studies conducted by the CCBC reflect how researchers have defined diversity in children's literature? How do studies typically assert the importance of diversity in children's literature? And do studies typically consider all types of diversity mentioned by the American Library Association when discussing diversity in children's literature? This research project utilizes a mixed method research strategy with the primary methodology being quantitative. I chose a mixed methods research strategy because utilizing quantitative research methods would allow this study to present an accurate representation of the statistics and diversity in children's literature, and utilizing qualitative research methods would allow the study to give readers a better understanding of why diversity in children's literature is typically discussed the way it is. I chose to utilize convenience sampling for this study. Convenient sampling would be best for this project because people within specific fields of study often know other people within that study. So I figured that researchers would be able to refer the researchers of this study to more researchers who have produced studies based on diversity in children's literature. The data collection for this project will contain self-administered questionnaires, qualitative interviews, and secondary analysis of the CCBC. The self-administered questionnaire will consist of 4 questions which will be shared through SurveyMonkey and collected once per year. Only the researchers of this study will have access to the SurveyMonkey account. All qualitative interviews will be conducted face-to-face, allowing researchers to be able to read nonverbal cues they would not be able to read otherwise. These in-person interviews will allow participants to be able to provide more natural responses. The interview will consist of 10 questions and will be conducted once per year. All information gathered from this study will be confidential, which means that the notes taken from qualitative interviews, as well as data gathered through SurveyMonkey, will be stored securely in a lockbox which only the researchers will be able to access. Before conducting the study, it is important for the researchers to take ethical considerations into account. This study will need to receive permission from the CCBC, Institutional Review Board, American Library Association, and each participant who completes the questionnaire and participates in the interview every year. As stated before, all data collected will be stored in a lockbox with a code. Each participant will also receive and need to sign an informed consent form prior to participating in the questionnaires and interviews so that they fully understand the implications of this research project and how important their consistent participation is. When it comes to the limitations of this study, the test-retest correlations, bias among participants, bias among researchers, the time commitment this study requires, and the amount of participants participating in this study are of concern. The test-retest correlations will not be consistent if someone chooses to no longer complete the questionnaires or interviews for this study after investing a significant amount of time participating in it. Since this would significantly impact the results of this study, the researchers of this study will make it clear to participants that this study will be conducted over a period of 10 years, and consistent participation is vital to the results of this study, since its goal is to specifically identify the trends which are presented through studies that define diversity in children's literature and discuss the importance of it. Bias among participants is a concern because when participants gain knowledge about the purpose of the study, they can become more likely to be more prepared for the questionnaires and interviews each time they complete them, and respond with answers they believe the researchers would like to have. The researchers of this study will try their best to work against this by reminding the participants to respond as naturally as possible each time they complete the questionnaire and interview. Researchers can also become biased and must not allow their bias to influence the study. Therefore, the researchers must agree to be impartial to the conclusions of this research, be able to acknowledge their own preconceptions regarding the research topic, and be able to operate throughout the study in an unbiased manner. Since the study will be conducted over such a long period of time, participants may be intimidated by the time commitment and refuse to participate. Others may choose to change their career paths and may no longer want to produce studies based on diversity in children's literature. However, the researchers of this study will make the time commitment clear to participants prior to the start of the study in hopes to avoid this. Since many research projects rely on a large amount of responses, the amount of people being studied may be viewed as a concern. Since the researchers will not be interviewing a large number of people, the results will be limited. In order to help with the credibility of this research, this study may use previous studies to help support its claims. I believe that this study is significant in a couple of ways. First, by examining researchers who have produced studies based on diversity in children's literature, this study will reveal the types of content that is possibly influencing the public's idea of what diversity in children's literature means. Secondly, this study could assist in evaluating the effectiveness of the way diversity in children's literature is defined in research, as well as the way the importance of diversity in children's literature is interpreted. Okay, so this concludes my research presentation. Please feel free to reach out to me at megan.may18@stjohns.edu with any questions. Thank you. Bye.